Help yourselves, folks. One of the Tri-Town nice traditions we have, doing cookies and stuff. I'm gonna pass them around. There's cider here. Pass them around. Okay, we're live. You don't chew on it. We're live, Brian.
Brian, you want?
Want to sing to you?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending the 2015 April Fool's edition of Tri-Town. Appreciate you all coming. And I think we might have some matters off the budget. Excuse me, I apologize. Off the agenda. And all right, yeah, budget's coming up, Lorraine. Sorry.
I'm done.
Let's go through the agenda and then we can take it up under new business. All right? First item of agenda is discussion of the Neshoba Regional School District FY16 budget.
Do you want to see who's here? Did you want to do that, go around the room or anything?
Oh, you know what? That's a very good point. Why don't we go around the room and introduce ourselves? Sorry.
Jennifer Leone, Lancaster Selectman.
Don Lowe, Bolton Town Administrator.
Stan Wysocki, Bolton Selectman.
Brian Burke, Stowe Selectman.
Don Ryan, Stowe Selectman.
John Hawks, Stowe Selectman.
Dave O'Connor, Bolton.
Tammy O'Connor, Bolton.
Candy Bow, Bolton.
Maureen Bush, School Committee, Stowe.
Lorraine Romasto, Bolton, School Committee Rep.
Nicole Odekirk, Stowe, I'll put it all together. Stowe School Committee.
Ann Needle, Stowe, Bolton Independence.
Dave Lindsay, Bolton resident.
Michael Wood, Superintendent Neshoba.
Ed Lucas, though.
Alice Lucas, Stowe, Representative.
Ed Boquillan, Superintendent of Minuteman.
GH, Stowe.
Lynn Coletti, Stowe, School Committee.
Charles Kern, Stowe Selectman.
Well, now we know the players. Let's get to the first item of the agenda tonight. And whoever's got the oatmeal raisin cookies, pass them forward. I'll turn into the chocolate chips here because... Who wants to start us off on the school budget discussion?
Well, I guess since it's a fait accompli, it's done at this point, but the Tri-Town hasn't met since then. So perhaps Michael, if you would just kind of give us an overview of the adopted budget and what it means for assessments in the towns. I think some of us have seen those figures, but maybe that might open up a discussion.
Sure. So the school committee approved at their last school committee meeting a budget that's increasing 4.21%. That's the total budget increase. And the Bolton assessment increase will be 3.13%. Lancaster's assessment will be 3.14%, and the Stowe assessment will be 5.21%. And the two factors that matter most for the assessment calculation, of course, is enrollment and the minimum local contribution figure, which is a state number that we just plug it.
There's no option. You just plug a formula in, and this is what comes out.
Correct.
Why is there such a discrepancy between our brothers to the west and Stowe, magnitude of 60% or something?
So enrollment is a big component of that, and then you had just a slight adjustment in your minimum local contribution number.
Is our enrollment that significantly that much higher than the others?
It's noticeable. I don't have off the top of my head the exact percentage difference, but to give you an example, so Stowe is approximately, give or take, 900 students K through 8. Bolton is approximately 800 students K through 8, and Lancaster is about 750.
Well, that means that primarily it's the foundation numbers that skew it.
This year, yes. Because you were much closer before the when we were doing an estimate, you were much closer together for your percentages.
Is this, is it good?
I was gonna ask, you mentioned that it's a 5-year rolling average, as I recall.
That's for capital. For this, it's the prior year.
Okay, I thought even the enrollment was based on.
I'll double check, but I think
Right,
it's the prior year.
because I was gonna ask you about those numbers, and then you mentioned.
And you've been increasing each year for the last.
Yeah, I know that our enrollment, I was looking at the, what is it, NESDC or something?
NASDAQ, yes.
NASDAQ enrollment numbers,
Right.
and ours have been going up, Lancaster's been going down a little bit.
Mhm.
You know, I just did a back of the napkin, 5-year rolling average. And if I include pre-K, and I don't know whether that's supposed.
does.
That's included in there also. It looks like our assessment may be a little bit high.
Your assessment may be a little bit, it's higher, the percentage-wise, it's higher than the other two towns.
No, I think that if I take a 5-year average for all 3 towns,
Mhm.
I think the numbers may be off a little bit, but I can talk to you about that
Okay.
afterwards, you know. Like I said, I did it in about 15 minutes, and if I'm not using the same formula, it's close, but it's 1 or 2 percentage points off, because I was a little concerned about that also, that, the numbers, that our numbers are high, that much higher, and it doesn't look like our enrollment spiked, or it may have spiked in the last year or two, but on a 5-year average, I don't think it would have that much of an effect. So,
Is it something you could put together for us in your copious free time as kind of a 5-year look back as to how these have looked each year at this time?
Yes, I have the 5-year look back right here. You are, you generally have run, except in FY12, you generally run roughly one full percentage point above. And then last year, Stowe spiked about 1.5% above, and that's where you roughly remain now.
well, we're about, it's a little over 2.
2%.
I'm sorry, it is 2, so you've gone up. The last 3 years, you kind of inched up.
Yep. And that, it makes sense based on the numbers I looked at, that we would definitely be higher. But, again,
We can take a look at it.
I'm sure you've got the numbers that you used, so that, we can check them all out.
Yeah.
So,
It's a pretty simple formula.
yeah.
Any other questions from the other member towns about the actual amounts of their assessments?
We've gotten the number, we figured out what it's gonna mean, and we're going forward.
What does it mean for Lancaster as far as budgetary?
I think it leaves us with a little over $100,000 to do capital. So, and about maybe 1.8 million in capital we need to do. So, it's a start, but it left us with some wiggle room,
Just barely.
barely, but some.
Don, what about Bolton? These numbers impacting your current budget?
You left us with some wiggle room. We were able to do some things, not necessarily everything that we had on the drawing board, but we were able to do some things.
Right, we're gonna be finalizing our warrant tomorrow, having a discussion about the budget and also a discussion about the school district budget as well.
We meet next week to find out.
We meet next Tuesday, and at that time,
No, it's Tuesday after.
Oh, that's right, yeah, this is
because of,
second,
Second and fourth.
see, today's Wednesday is the 1st, we meet the 2nd and 4th, so we have a 3-week gap because of the calendar break.
oh, well, okay, I'd have to double check, but.
We meet on the 14th next.
Oh, yes, you're right, because this is the end of the month, beginning of the month. It's April Fool's Day. The Stowe Selectmen then will be considering the budget and their recommendation, or not recommendation, I take it that none of the other member towns have stated their position?
We have not made a recommendation or a non-recommendation. That will be done tomorrow.
We're not finalizing until second week of April, and I think we're waiting for FinCom to come in with their recommendation.
I imagine we'll be getting something from FinCom too.
Sure. Yep, well, the warrant is being finalized, and their recommendations are being incorporated into the final printed version, which will go to the printer as soon as we decide what that number is.
I will double check with FinCom to see that they give us a position on the budget from the school district. And for those who didn't attend or couldn't attend, the budget vote of the school committee last Wednesday night, the Stowe selectmen approved their budget without passing on the school committee's budget because we didn't have it before us and we couldn't have it before us. But regardless of our approval, disapproval, or just abstention, that school committee budget is always going to make it to town floor. And it's up in the first instance to town meeting to decide if they're going to approve that budget. Now, anything else? Oh, yes.
I just wanted to make a comment. You know, it's, while I'm not happy with a 5.2% assessment increase, I do appreciate the school committee and the school district working with us to bring it down from a 7.5% increase.
Actually, it was over 8 at one point, one iteration just before.
So, you know,
Yeah.
I just figured, you know, I wanted to say that I do appreciate it. I am concerned about the sustainability because I believe that more of your stored assets than you would have liked have been used, and that's not going to be sustainable. So going forward, I would strongly recommend that you look at cost containment versus spending the stored assets that you probably won't have this time next year.
And
but-
that's a great jumping off point for the next subsection of this agenda as I see it. And of course, we appreciate the reductions in the increase that were voted by the school committee next week, but maybe we should talk about where those reductions in the increase came from. And as my colleague, Mr. Ryan, points out, whether they're the types of changes to the budget that can be sustained over long periods of time. Does anybody want to give us an overview of what was decided last Wednesday night?
I'm happy to. Primarily the reductions came from sort of three pockets or three buckets, if you will. So we have system-wide accounts, which include insurances and fixed costs based on fixed costs. So we reduced out of those accounts. We reduced out of existing salaries a smaller amount. Our capital plan we reduced about $80,000, and then teaching and learning, which is curriculum development.
So fill in the gaps that I leave, Mr. Superintendent. The big savings were realized in increasing the amount of E&D, or excess and deficiency funds,
Right.
that were used. And there was some, teaching and learning always seems to take a hit. The scheduled maintenance was put off for, some scheduled maintenance was put off for a year. But no real programmatic changes,
There were no programmatic reductions as a result.
and even the increased programs for special ed, or the new faculty there. That was continued.
That was continued, correct.
As is the move of the portable classroom.
Oh,
That was-
yeah.
That was initially targeted for a quote, savings or reduction.
Right.
Let's not forget that. But that was taken off the table. But we're talking about the things that were actually decided last Wednesday night. Is there anything that I missed that is significant? Yes, Dave?
I think people are overstating the degree of the contribution from the E&D fund. I think your original proposal was to use 1.2 or 1.3 million from that?
The very original was
Very-
1 million,
Okay.
and it's now 1.6.
Yeah, but there was a point where it was either 1.2 or 1.
That was one
A
iteration.
very early
Yep.
iteration. So I think there was only about 300,000 in the end that came from that. And so I don't think we should overstate. Personally, I don't think we're draining E&D to some dangerously low level.
Dave, I did not say that we were draining E&D.
I think
did
the
not.
impression was being given.
I'm sorry, there were, there was,
1.5 million.
there was increases in the amount of E&D over than what was originally, and I didn't say it was draining or why don't you lead us off on the sustainability point? Do you believe that that kind of cost savings move, or actually revenue enhancement move, is sustainable for the school district over the long haul?
No, that was a one, well, it wasn't a full one-time shot. I think there's room to do a little more of it again. I would have gone to $1,750,000. But-
Leaving 250,000 in the current E&D?
Yes, because I think it would replenish to $1,250,000. I know George says it won't, but every year the selectmen in Bolton tell me it won't, and it always replenishes to somewhere between 800,000 and $1 million.
Well, then, let's say we're in the same position next year. And I'm not trying to criticize the school committee for what they did, okay? I know there's always some sensitivity about this. But let's say, and as far back as I can remember, when I was on school committee, we took about $1 million or so from E&D every year to make the budget go. You showed up at all our meetings. Am I remembering correctly,
Yes,
Dave?
I think that- maybe a shade more, because sometimes it got over $2 million, but
Actually, a course correction, it was actually less than, it's only increased in the last 5 years to the $1 million mark.
How much was it when I was voting these things?
About $800,000.
I remember, well,
I may have just capped it to $1 million just because when did you get off? We started increasing.
it was when you started being
2009.
happy again.
2000, FY09.
Roughly, but let's say we're in the same position next year, and I'd like to hear from the superintendent. Now, traditionally, we put in maybe 800,000 to $1 million. That's the way that the budget gets passed in school committee. So at that point, we're going to have $450,000 to $250,000 in E&D. Is that,
no, I think long-term, the way things work, 2% a year is all that's sustainable, because the towns get about 3% a year. 2.5 plus some new growth takes you up to 3%. And the way the assessments work, the state aid stays level. And so a 2% increase in the school budget is about a 3% increase in the assessment. So I think long-term, there's only room for a 2% increase each year in the school budget without getting into override territory. And I recognize that that's real tough to do that, but I think that's what's long-term sustainable.
what do you say to that? Well, you know, I don't want to ping pong back between the superintendent and Mr. Lindsay. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? And when I say you guys, I'm talking about our school committee representatives who are present tonight.
I don't see how we can, if there's no new revenue, then I don't see how we're going, without making cuts in programs, we can keep it to just 2% on a continuous basis, because like, look in the next couple of years, if we don't, we can't take 1.5 million out of E&D next year in all likelihood. Because that, who knows how much there will actually be there.
Over
The
1.6.
school, we hope. The school choice funds that we've been getting are declining because we rolled back on school choice, so there will be less money there to put into the budget, so. I don't see where only 2% is gonna come from, so, without cutting a lot.
Jim, one of the things, I was privileged to be a representative of the three towns in the negotiating process. Concluded quite quickly this time, I think, and it was what appears to be a modest increase. This year was 2%. Next year it's 2.5%.
The total will be 3, because it's 1.5 and 1.5.
1.5, okay. So the cost for that is a little bit less. It's 0.75 for the second 6 months, so it's about 2% next year, but a rollout
Little over 2, yeah.
of 3 for the going in. And the third year, it's a 1-2 split, which is
Well,
cost.
this year is the third year.
The third, next year is the third? Oh, it's 16, that's right. So the third year is a 1-2 split. So the first day of the contract is a 1% increase, 2% increase in the second 181st day of the year. And the cost of that still is 2%, but it rolls out again to 3%. So the rollouts for the salary increases are 3% and 3% for the next 2 years. And if you're talking about limiting your cost, and that's 80% of your budget. So question on sustainability, when you know that those costs are there, and then this year is at 2%, the total personnel costs, if I remember correctly, Michael, were some 4.5, something like that?
With the new positions.
New positions, steps, lanes, whatever the correct terminology is. So a 2% is not a 2%.
Yeah, let me just make sure I understand you clearly, Mr. Hawks and Mr. Superintendent. The number of 3% and 3%, is that?
That's the cost figure for each year, but the rollout going into the following year is higher. The cost for next year is, this current budget is 2%.
And let me just, I hate to interrupt you, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding. We're just talking about contract.
Yes.
We're not talking about steps or anything like
No,
that.
the step increase is 2% cost, but it's structured in such a way that at the beginning of the next year, there is an extra percent built into it, because you've delayed the increase during the second year.
So in real numbers, including steps and the contracted increases in overall salary, what's the bottom line for 2016, and can you give us a bottom line for 2017 yet?
For personnel increases?
Yes, please.
So for existing salaries, it was about 3.5%, so about $1.5 million.
Just the percentages, I think,
Yeah,
at this point.
so I would expect FY17 to be about the same.
3.5.
Maybe slightly more, because it's a little more percentage-wise.
Because this gets to Mr. Lindsay's point about
Yeah, I mean, I
what,
think his
what-
math is technically correct. I mean, if you're working backwards from what the town's assessment would like to be, if it needs to be around 3%, working backwards for Bolton, at least it comes to about 2%. Working backwards for Stowe, though, it becomes almost 0 if they want to be at 3%, because they're, right now they're showing it, roughly about a 2% difference on the assessment side of things. The sustainability, I totally agree, it's a sustainability question, and it's about revenue, and it's about what the state contributes to education. And, for us, they have not contributed anything additional, really, for the last 5 years. So it's been borne entirely on our communities.
any other thoughts along this line?
One thing that I did notice when I started looking over the enrollment numbers is that it looks like last year or this year we're peaking. or at least
It
that's,
might be.
that's what the thought process, that's what the numbers showed in the projections.
Mhm.
May or may not come to fruition, one, you know, it's the best guess. But if that's the case, and the enrollment starts going down, will you be looking at, call it reducing personnel, so that we can, you know, maybe we will be able to at least reduce the increase.
Sure.
You know,
So we reevaluate personnel every year, and we cut sections every year based on enrollment, if it's possible. So that happens, it's just absorbed in our, in my presentation, you know, in my development of the budget. But that happens every year, absolutely.
Yeah, because the only other thing that I'd thought about, and I was listening to it, you know, when the gentleman from the Department of Education was talking about how, yes, a lot of school districts are in tough shape, and what they've had to do is they've had to cut administration, you know, in order, because you know, some of the larger cities, they're not giving them any more money. The state's not giving them any more money, so they're essentially being hobbled with a, you know, a zero or slight increase, if anything. And they've been figuring out how to do it, at least, you know, keep that in place. And in some school districts, I think they were saying that they'd cut administration by 30%. Left the same number of teachers there, but administration had to go. So I'd hate to see that happen, but, you know, depending on what point we all get to, we'd, you know, we can't, as Mr. Lindsay says, we can't keep going up, you know, 3 and 5% a year forever, you know?
And I agree with you, in the last 7 years, we've had a principal
Yep.
position and a director of teaching and learning, and we would look at other cost savings if we got to that point.
Yep. Let's hope we don't have to.
Well, that suggests that going forward, we start thinking about what's going to happen next year. I mean, this was, from a number of perspectives, an unpleasant budget year for the school committee. I'm sure you got a lot of feedback, some of it not always positive. It's also, though, not over for the select boards. We have to decide what we're going to do with your budget. Don't worry, it'll come to town floor, okay? But what I was going to propose is, just as an item of consideration, is that the member towns begin discussing, in the context of for lack of a better term, committees of correspondence. We can meet, and we can start deciding if we should be writing letters to the state government, writing letters. There are seats up here too if you wanted to. So do I. Writing letters to the state government, writing letters to the school committee, starting to look at next year's budget proactively. So the decisions aren't made in the space of a couple of weeks, and some of the things that weren't on the table this year that might have to be on the table next year. There's a lead up to that kind of consideration. And I also think that a full day's budget meeting that I know that we couldn't have this year for some reason, you know, on the Saturday budget meeting with muffins in the morning. That's,
We had a couple of them.
I know.
They had pizza that night.
But you know, that is also very helpful, especially if it's early on in the year. I know it's tough to form a budget when you're not sure of what state aid numbers are going to be, but the more lead time you can give the towns, the more time we can start grappling with these things ourselves. And I remember that when they first started these full Saturday budget meetings, were not just about the muffins, they were about, they were kind of about the, not a true zero-sum budgeting process, but something that was modeled closely on it, so that everybody could see where the, not just the school committee, but where the other member towns could see that their budget dollars were going and would be going. So I encourage the school committee to do that. Does anybody want to chime in on my idea of a committee of correspondence?
No, I think it's a good idea, and I think the process needs to start a lot sooner than it normally does.
Well, the school committee's got to follow its own budget. We can't force the pace for them, but I was talking about a committee of correspondence right now, so that we can explain to the towns that we represent, what our feeling is about the budget increases and how we are going to be able to deal with them, or not be able to deal with them. Do you guys want to put that on your meeting agendas?
We can do that. We have a meeting tomorrow night, and then we'll be meeting again on the 9th, so we can have it on our agenda for the 9th.
I'm not talking about getting together right away. I'm just talking about
No, but for the selectmen to discuss.
discuss approaching these things proactively and getting our positions out there too.
Mr. Chair.
One second.
Our agenda is already set for the 6th, but I will bid it on the next one. I can't speak for the rest of my board, and I've only got a month left, so, but I will encourage them to do it. I think it's a great idea. I think that's something that has a tri-town perspective, I think would be really helpful.
I'll get right to you, Mr. Superintendent. I just wanted to express the loss not only for Lancaster, but for the entire member town.
Oh, thank you.
That Ms. Leone will no
I'm
longer.
not disappearing completely.
That would be a shame. Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Superintendent. Thanks for being
I think
patient.
it's a great idea to maybe meet jointly in this function with our representatives and senators to impress upon them. Remember, they still have an opportunity to craft a budget, and we can definitely influence them collectively about the sustainability conversation and help them understand how their vote would help our communities.
Well, I think our state legislators are making the rounds right now.
I was just going to say, I don't think, while part of it is a problem of revenue from the state or lack thereof, if the state ends up taking more money, we're all going to be paying for it anyway. And out here, when we tend to send $1 to Boston for it to be redistributed, we usually get back about 30 cents. So I think it's more controlling the expenditure side than it is, just asking the state to give more money so that we don't have to take as much money out of our town budget.
That's a good point. And have the state legislators met with the regional school district and its school committee?
Not yet, not this year. We're actually going to see them on April 29th.
Oh, good. But when I'm talking about the committee's correspondence, I'm not talking about any positions that we take or making any kind of decisions or who we want to speak to or how we want to speak to them. I'm just talking about forming a consensus about how we look at our interaction with the school budget. And I apologize, with the school district and its budget. And that's something that I think it's better to move forward on. We might ask, I mentioned this at the budget meeting that you guys had last Wednesday, and I understood later that there were some problems, but I don't want to sound like an old fuddy-duddy, but when I was there, we had the town administrators meet with the superintendent and his financial director regularly. I don't want to, you know, maybe we can start that up again. Anything to give the member towns a little lead time, because we know you undergo a lot of work and a lot of trial and tribulation in getting your budget together, but we also have to then deal with it, so it would be better if we get out in front on this. So, so I think we have consensus that everybody, from every member town, that they're going to at least discuss the idea of, for lack of a better term, if you come up with a better term, go with it, committee correspondence, so that the member towns can start thinking proactively about next year's budget, as I hope the school district and school committee will be, and long-term sustainability. Yes?
Yeah, Ed DeLuca, I think you do want to impress upon the state legislature that there are very specific aspects of the budget that directly affect regional districts. The obvious one is busing, and if you just had them pay for all of the busing as they had promised to do, that would benefit the town, and it's straightforward. So saying, yeah, we pay a lot of money to the state in taxes, so we don't want to ask the state for, for funding our schools the way they should, is not, I think, the appropriate way to go. Yeah, you have to take care of expenditure, but you also have to look at the revenue side. And the state is not pulling their weight, and I think that the towns need to express that opinion collectively as citizens, and the town boards need to express that opinion.
Mr. DeLuca, your timing could not be better, because the second item on tonight's agenda is just that, regional school transportation. And this is something, I agree with you, we've dealt with it, I'm published on it, or at least was 5-6 years ago, with the help of the school district administration. I wrote a piece that I'm sure everybody will have forgotten, that was entitled, "When is a Promise Not a Promise?" And Mr. DeLuca is quite correct. The state legislature, in order to encourage communities to regionalize their school systems, promised that, I think it's, that every dollar that is spent on busing over the, perhaps it's only over the 1.5 or 2 mile limit, would be reimbursed. And our state legislators came in last week, and they said, well, the goal is 75%.
No, he didn't say goal. He said this. Senator Eldridge, as I heard him, correct me if I'm wrong, said no. Our obligation is limited to 75%, and I think that's why I asked that this item be put on the agenda, because I believed that it was 100%. I believe, the Prop 2.5 did a bunch of things besides limit our property taxes, and one of them was to provide an anti-mandate provision that apparently the legislature seems to play fast and loose with. But I would like to see this one in particular. I think it's one we can all get together on, no matter what we're coming from, regional school districts, Minuteman, anybody, to form some kind of a coalition and try to get some voices out, Mass Municipal Association, wherever we can go, to try to get the state to live up to its obligations. Go to the state auditor and get a ruling on it if you have to.
I agree. I didn't want to be as harsh in my characterization of Senator Eldridge's explanation.
I'm not being harsh, I'm reporting what he said.
Okay.
Basically, he said, we're good.
Yeah,
We're hitting the number we're supposed to.
It's supposed to be 75, no, but it's supposed to be 75, and we're working our way back to it. It's about 60 or less. He had acknowledged that. He said our responsibility is 75, and we're at 60.
Okay.
My point is, we're at 100% and we're at 60.
Well, okay. I don't disagree with my colleague, Mr. Hawks. Perhaps I could have worded it differently. But yes, the bottom line is the state legislature thinks they're doing a great job if they keep 3/4 of their promise. And and that 3/4 that extra quarter is a lot. And then also with respect to even that 3/4 promise, my understanding, and I didn't get exact figures, is it was around 65% for Neshoba historically, or at least in the recent history. Is that your understanding, Mr.
It's
Superintendent?
been around 60 as routine. It did jump up to about 66% last year.
Ah.
So,
Just for frame of reference, we are televising this, or recording it to be televised, so that, let people know in the town. We was talking about percentage. What's the number? What's our total budget for transportation in the district?
so our budget last year was $1.5 million, and we received $897,380.
So if they lived up their full obligation, we'd have another $600,000-$700,000 in a year when we're saying, how do we fund our budgets?
Exactly.
I mean, it's worth, it ain't chopped liver.
I do not disagree with Mr. Hawks, and remember, I'm one of the few people in this room on record with a newspaper as protesting this. On the other hand, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't, as Mr. DeLuca said, petition the state to fulfill its promise to the full, but keep in mind, the state legislature has been underfunding regional school transportation for decades. It'd be...
Doesn't excuse it going forward. I say, let's go after it.
It doesn't excuse, Mr. Hawks, I agree with you. It doesn't excuse it going forward. It doesn't excuse it going backwards. I'm just saying, it may not be in the cards in the near future that they're going to turn around and fulfill that promise. I mean...
Not voluntarily.
Well, I understand that some lawsuits are being considered. Is that correct, Mr. Superintendent?
That's right.
And it's just that I know when I tell myself I'm only going to have 4 cookies, but actually 3 cookies, but I always have 4. It's hard to knock off that extra cookie, even though I know it's a promise I made to myself. Yes, Ms. DeLuca?
With respect to cookies, the legislature's original promise was from the late 40s. And they did finally fund 100% of regional transportation for 1 year only in the early mid-2000s.
I do remember
In
that.
response to pressure from a group of school committee members around the state. And you probably remember, many people probably.
I started talking about cookies and I just got... Keep going.
So it isn't possible for them to go back to 100%. They've done it not too long ago, and they could do it again. It is not something that has never happened.
I did not say it wasn't possible. I did not say it's something that we shouldn't work earnestly and hard for. I'm just saying that in terms of next year, I wouldn't count on getting that 600,000 margin that we were promised, because the promise has been broken so many times. But I'm all for using the committees of correspondence to talk to our state legislatures. The school district, I think they have a meeting with the legislators day, and go in there and make your pitch. That'd be great. And we'll try and think of things in our so-called committees of correspondence, how we can do that. Maybe I'll just rewrite my my article and resubmit it. I'm sure everybody's eager for that. But I think we should be practical about what we can expect next year. Any other thoughts on regional school transportation?
Vocational regional school district transportation, is that at 60% as well? Is that?
The
It's
same.
the same, they have the same reimbursement?
We're a regional school, it's treated all the same.
Okay. I did see in somebody's budget, they were gonna cut vocational regional transportation. It was somehow specified, and that confused me, because I
That's a
didn't.
different line item.
Yeah,
That line item is for transportation for non-resident
oh, okay,
students, and that's been zeroed.
thank you.
Any other questions or points? Excuse me.
If the superintendents that are here could provide at least our board with the language and in specificity enough so that we could send something off. I know when we met with Jamie Eldridge and Kate Hogan, the impression that we got was that they felt they were living up to their, the state's obligation. I'm more than happy to bring it up at one of our meetings to to send a letter to them, to explain to them. I think you probably know exactly chapter and verse where it says that they're obligated, or they've promised at least, for 100%. I'm happy to bring it up at one of our meetings and send off a letter. I suspect that my colleagues in the other towns might be happy to do the same.
Well, that could be something.
Wouldn't hurt.
Absolutely.
That could be something that the committee's correspondence address, and I think in my article, I keep talking about wistfully, I did cite that statute, chapter and verse. But just to be fair to our state legislators, I know I'm not disagreeing with what my colleagues, Mr. Ryan and Mr. Hawks, said, that they said it may not have been as well thought out as they had liked, is all I'm trying to say. Maybe they were talking about a target they set for themselves. I'm just trying to be fair to them.
That's it. They may have set a target, but they may have set the target
Yeah, okay, but so.
at something other than was promised, that's all.
Yes, so, okay, I don't think they were making any excuses or even extenuation for the promise being broken. That's all I'm trying to say on their behalf.
Just want to give them something to help them out.
I'm not saying, okay.
Mr. Chairman, just since the request was made for that information coming here, since this is a tri-town, if you want to get it to us to stow up, since we're holding the meeting here tonight, we'll make sure it gets disseminated, to spread the same information, so you don't have to get it to all three towns separately.
Just add
We'd appreciate
it to the email.
Email's
But, email everybody. Anything else on regional school transportation and the promise that is not a promise? All right. That brings us to our third agenda item, technical school options, which I assume mean vocational school options. Now, I want to preface this topic by saying that this is something that did not come up independently on any of the member boards' radar screen. We had you all in, as I understand it, when you presented, or Kevin presented on your behalf, the capital planning projects that you have under consideration. The superintendent has floated an idea that maybe I'm going to let him discuss and explain, but it's not something that we've taken up, as far as I know, in any of the member towns. It was something that the superintendent just floated. What I think you need to know is the superintendent is an idea person. He floats a lot of ideas. That doesn't mean that we're going to be taking action on any. I just want to set that out as the ground rules, okay? So no action has been taken, no action has even been contemplated as far as I know. It hasn't even made our agenda yet. So, with that in mind, maybe the superintendent, and I'm sorry I'm throwing you to the wolves. That's why you get paid the big money. Maybe you could explain to some of the members of our Tri-Town meeting tonight who are here precisely because they want to know more about what your thoughts are.
Right, right. The challenge sometimes of public business is it has to be done in public, and to start something, it has to be done in public. So this is just an opportunity just to have a start of a conversation about where our students in the three towns attend for technical, vocational technical high schools. Primarily because as we look at our high school and very selfishly put it out there, we are running out of space, and we have been building programs that meet a wider variety of needs. We consider ourselves a comprehensive high school. We want to meet the needs of all of our students who want to, by choice, attend our high school within our community versus their other choice high school, which is Minuteman Vocational High School. And over the years, anecdotally, through our guidance department and principals at our high school, one of the pieces of feedback that has come through our middle schools and our high schools is that distance has been one of the reasons why children have not chosen to attend Minuteman. We are not the ones who make the choice about where our students go to Minuteman. I'm still a little bit under a mystery of how the organization of what towns went with what Vocational high schools, I don't quite know the history of that. But it's a difficult conversation too, because I think all of our technical high schools in the area are full. And so it's not even something that is an easy or obvious solution on the horizon. But it's really, as I think I understand it, your party to the regional agreement for Minuteman, and therefore it's a conversation that first has to start here. It's not something our school.
You started it.
I know, but I'm bringing it to you, is what I'm doing. And whether you want to go with it or not really is your decision. It's not our decision, it's not a Neshoba Regional School District decision. But it's something that, as we look at what students are looking for and what they're successful at and what their interests lie at, I think there are times when our students would benefit from attending a vocational high school, and they don't have that option if distance is the barrier that they can't psychologically or emotionally or otherwise get over. And so I'm trying to understand if the three towns would like to enter into a conversation with Minuteman, with other vocational high schools, and just see what kinds of options we might have.
All right, now you know the context. It was something that was started by none of the member towns, but it has been brought to us. We've been a partner of Minuteman for decades. And so perhaps now that I'm not even saying the conversation has started. Now that the balloon has been floated, I'm sure that Minuteman would like to give their perspective. Keeping in mind that we haven't considered this.
Speak for just one
Oh,
second.
yeah, sure. Just,
The question of how we got into this district.
Oh.
It was really the only school available when we looked to start vocational education.
Oh.
So it was it. That none of the other area schools had started. So this was our choice, and this was our only choice.
Wasn't Worcester, hasn't Worcester been around for 50 or 60 years? I'm not saying that Worcester would have been convenient, but I know Worcester was
No, was a
around.
home.
But even
But I don't-
still,
but I don't think they were- I don't think they were
when
adding
Worcester
people.
was built, again, it was not, Minuteman was state-of-the-art at the time.
Okay.
Right? It was innovative. It had all sorts of new creative things within the region that even some of the other vocational schools didn't have. The curriculums and things that were put together were at the time, circa 1970, were brand spanking new and innovative in the Commonwealth.
I'm not trying to disagree with the choice. I'm not even trying to disagree with my colleague from Lancaster, Ms. Leone. I'm just saying that I passed the old Worcester Tech
Yeah.
building
Well, yeah,
every
but
day.
they
but
were
we
already
did-
established. So we were looking for a new district to get involved with.
Okay,
You know,
okay.
so it was the start of the district. It was the 16 towns, and it was where we are.
All right.
So now,
My
Mr.
comments are,
Why don't you introduce yourself again?
my
just
name
for
is
the
Ed
TV.
Boquillan. I'm the superintendent of Minuteman Regional Vocational Technical School District. This is my 8th year. I live in Lincoln. I think it behooves all of our 16-member towns at this point in the history of Minuteman and what we're trying to do with our new regional agreement to look at this question. I think you need to do your due diligence, and I think that's part of your job. So I'm not offended at all by the fact that this question has come up. It's come up in a number of our member communities, and I think it's a healthy debate because it talks about the value of vocational technical education today. It also allows us to talk about what we add to the value of an education for a person from our 16-member towns, and I'm always eager to do that and happy to do it. So I think it's a good, healthy thing to do. And with the regional agreement being, going through its process, now is probably the time to do it, so it makes sense. And Superintendent Wood is doing what I think he needs to do for his district and for the 3 towns that he represents, or that are represented in this district.
He doesn't represent the street.
The second thing I want to point out is that specifically in some of the exchanges that we had around the reason this is brought up in regards to distance. Just as a matter of fact, and I can have this, share this data with you, we surveyed the parents and families of incoming freshmen in 2012 and in 2013 who were accepted into Minuteman but did not choose to come to Minuteman, to ask them why. And of the 10 variables we gave them to choose from, one of them was distance. And I would say it was like number 6 or 7 on the hit parade in terms of why they didn't come. Well, you'd have to look at where they came from and flush it out a little bit more. But it was not, I thought it was going to be a bigger issue for some students and families as well.
Do you have any idea, though, the attrition, say, from freshman to sophomore after they've gone through a year?
Of traveling? No, we
Travel.
haven't asked that
Okay,
question.
Full disclosure, my son goes to Minuteman, and when we were discussing this with the guidance counselors at the high school, they said one of the main reasons they get kids back is because they've done it for a year and they just can't keep doing it.
But that's not just technical school, that's some private schools too. We've heard the same thing in some of the
Okay.
private, they come back to the home district.
But they can't do the distance. I mean, that was
Oh.
The feedback.
that
We
was the
can
feedback
certainly-
they
we
gave
have
me.
all that
I don't know
data.
if that's true or not, but that was, maybe that's just anecdotal.
You can get you the actual numbers.
We
Okay,
can tell you if it's true.
okay, thank you. Because that would be, I mean, I think intellectually you say, yeah, you know, you get up at 5:30 and you get on the bus at 6 and you get to school at 7:15 and doesn't sound so horrible, but you do it for a year and maybe it sounds,
Well, after this winter, I'm sure.
there was, yeah.
The
there was
third point I wanted to make, I didn't want to, are you done?
No, go ahead.
The third point I wanted to make was I checked with our admissions folks today in regards to applications from the 3 towns. And in Lancaster, which is the furthest, we have 15 8th graders that have applied for next year. If that holds, the way, Lancaster will be our 2nd or 3rd largest sending town next year.
We're currently the third
You're currently the 3rd,
And the farthest away.
and the farthest, yeah.
so
No, and
the issue,
we haven't
I think
lost that many kids, though.
kids and families are seeing the value add, and they're willing to do it, which has caused me to think about putting Wi-Fi on the buses, so they can actually do some stuff while they're coming back and forth.
Wait a second.
Watch Netflix.
Not the bus driver.
Well, I don't, the school committee members who represent the member towns for the region and the regular district, do you have any thoughts or comments you'd like to add at this very, very pre-preliminary stage?
I'd like to see the data. I mean, that would be actually really interesting for not just vocational school, but other schools as well.
Well, I can tell you what our kids experience, because every kid that does go back, they're interviewed, and we ask them why.
Why they came back, or
Mhm.
you got that data too?
Yeah. Oh, we do.
But, just 1 second, if you don't mind, please, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you.
You know, a soft spot now.
When I think nobody's looking. Mr. Superintendent, you were envisioning something, just so I can flesh out this idea that you're floating, of increasing the programmatic offerings at Neshoba Regional?
No.
Or-
no.
Okay.
So, I'm thinking, and knowing that this data is out there, so that's a good, really first step that I think people need to do in this kind of exercise.
Well, Mr. McClellan agrees with you.
Is, I'm thinking there are students who may not attend Minuteman because of the distance, and therefore they come to Neshoba, and we would not necessarily have the enrollment spike that we have,
I see.
and need to look at some of the diversity of programming that we offer currently, if students were able to go to Minuteman.
Okay, so thank you. You fleshed it out a lot better for me. Is there any place feasibly closer?
Well,
I know you were talking about.
The closest is
Valley.
Assabet High School, that is closest to 2 of the towns.
Yeah.
And, but there are within this distance, I mean, we have Assabet High School, we have Monty Tech High School that's closer to Lancaster. We have Neshoba Technical High School, we have Minuteman. Am I reading that one?
Well, if
I'm
you
not
look at
sure
our
what
whole
Leicester
district, there's
offers.
about 8 vocational schools within distance, you know, Blue Hills and Shawsheen.
Okay, yeah. So, you know, there are other vocational technical high schools, I don't know what.
And you're
what
wondering,
they
Most of
offer
them
or
are
what they-
full.
And-
Yeah, that's the other problem is, I think that most of them are full. And so, you know, that's,
I will tell you that
Something
when the new regional agreement was first floated, Lancaster did contemplate what it would mean to switch our kids. And we did speak with Assabet, and they're completely full. Monty Tech is full.
Monty Tech has a wait list of 300 students.
There you go.
I
I haven't
called
tried.
all 3 superintendents myself.
What about Neshoba?
Neshoba
I
does
don't
have some space.
But with Lancaster being the third largest community sender, you know, your Westons and your Belmonts that have, or not Belmont, but
Lincoln.
Lincoln, that's
Dover.
Dover that sends 1 and pays for 5. They could probably sneak that 1 kid in just about anywhere, but we've got 36, 38 now coming from Lancaster, and it's gonna be very hard for us to find another community, another region that would be
One of
able
the
to absorb
things-
us.
I'm very sorry for making you wait.
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize.
No.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to add, I have a unique perspective in the sense that I have 2 kids that go to Minuteman. They endure the bus ride. They use the bus ride as an opportunity to get stuff done. But I actually did that trek for 4 years myself. And it was a perfect opportunity to, okay, in the morning, you'd plug in. If you had a test that day, you'd kind of do your pre-prep, and it's no different than if you were going to go to a job, or you're going to, you know, you have a 30-minute commute or a 40-minute commute. It's, I think regardless of what school you go to, it's what you make of it. You can either choose to make use of the time, or you're gonna sit and be like, this is boring, I've got 40 minutes on the bus ride and we hit traffic, but it's more about the experience of the school itself and what the school has to offer that really
draws these kids in.
but also puts the travel time lower on the list, like Mr. McClellan was saying. And, you know, if you're getting the experience and you're getting what you're desiring out of your education experience, that drops on the list of why to do it and not do it.
Well, that's very useful to hear.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I have to agree with Tammy. I'm on my 2nd child through Minuteman, and I graduated, and I was living in Stowe when I went to Minuteman myself. And just the ride in, I mean, my son now, he goes to UMass Lowell, he commutes from home, and he's on a co-op in Cambridge. And somebody said, you have that long ride? He goes, I used to go to Minuteman. It's the same thing. I listen to the radio. You know, he goes, the only thing I can't do is I can't work on my homework or stuff like that on the ride to or from. But he said, I'm used to it. It doesn't seem bad. I can go in and work in my field and commute. And the kids get home, at least our kids get home approximately the same time that they were getting home in elementary school.
In elementary school, and I just want to
And
add that they
middle
do
school.
have late buses and other options. It's not just, oh, you go in at 7 and you have to be home at 3 and you have to figure out the ride home if you decide to do an after-school activity or stay after for extra help. The transportation is provided for these in-district kids to get them where they need to be.
Yeah.
And to add to that, I mean, Tammy and I have a kind of more of a unique situation for our kids. Is I was an Assabet vocational graduate as well, and I lived just on the Bolton-Hudson line. So my commute on a Assabet bus was 35 minutes. So it's almost the same distance going to Lincoln.
At the same time.
The same time frame. But again, the rivalry and opportunities when I was going, Minuteman was the premium school. And so it was, you know, we wanted to go to Minuteman and couldn't because we were in the Assabet district. So we have a unique opportunity here in our districts to continue that.
Well, I'm sure many would say that Minuteman still is the premier
Correct.
vocational education. I'm sorry, Mr. Lugar, Superintendent Burquillian, you had your hand up.
I just
wanted to
wanted
get
to, it's not well understood, but students from Bolton, Lancaster, and Stowe today could apply for a program at any of the other vocational schools if the program's not offered by Minuteman. So there is already in place.
Do they get guaranteed acceptance?
No, there's no guaranteed acceptance anywhere. All students have to go through an admissions process, which is a little bit different in every school, but, and the regulations that were just passed also have an impact on this discussion wherever it goes. One of the, and Michael knows where many of these came from. The member district communities now have to give preference to member district students over out-of-district students. That's now in the regulations, which are now in effect, I believe. The second thing that the commissioner changed and the Board of Ed voted and supported is that non-residents communities will now have to contribute to a capital project if the receiving district is in an MSBA project, is an MSBA project. There's debt at all of the other schools related to different construction projects. So that's going to be added on top of the tuition rate. So those are some of the facts. There used to be some support for non-resident tuition transportation. I think last year that was $3 million, and I think with the 9C cuts, it's zero. So there's a lot of things at play around the discussion. It's good to have a real informed discussion about it, because you don't want to make a decision without having all the facts.
Well, actually, I think it would be beneficial, since the superintendent has brought this up, is to, what type of data is motivating this? I mean, if you indicate that, perhaps reduce the spike of enrollment at the high school, is that coming from the three towns in terms of individuals that are from Bolton, Lancaster, and Stowe that are going to Neshoba that might go somewhere else, or is this out of district students? And what's the motivation? Because if it's one or two, then I'm not sure it really justifies going through the whole process of this. But if it's a significant number, we don't know what that is.
We will have to keep that. I think that data is necessary before we can get out of the gate. I agree. My colleague, Mr. Osaki from Bolton, but if I'm hearing the superintendent correctly, he's saying that maybe students aren't enrolling in Minuteman because of the distance, and maybe there's other places they could go. Do I understand that correctly? And that would reduce the student population in our regional high school.
Well, specific to vocational technical high school. So I'm talking about students who have expressed an interest in attending vocational technical high school, but have reserved instead to go to Neshoba because of the distance.
I think Mr. Wiskowski is correct. We need to have some harder data on that. But also keep in mind, let's say we moved Minuteman next door. Is that going to be a savings for the member towns? No,
the more kids you said, I think Lancaster's per pupil is 27,000, 23? Is it? Yeah, no, I think.
Stowe's about 26.
Yeah, okay.
So we could be pulling kids out and getting them to Minuteman.
I bet Dr. Burquillian would love that.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, but we have to think about whether it's, we might be.
Sometimes it is about the kids, Mr. Chairman.
I'm not saying it's not about the kids. I'm just saying that in terms of reducing the population spikes, the stewards of the member towns have to take a long-term view.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'm sorry. I put you off, Mr. DeLuca, but Mr. Wasaki has a point, or town administrator from Bolton has a point.
There was a comment made that sparked something about the per pupil spending, whether it's 23, 24, whatever it is. I just wanted to make sure that everybody's on the same page here in that I've learned recently that not everybody does understand that whatever number of students get sent to Minuteman, does not affect the Neshoba school budget. They're paid for by the towns. So whatever we pay to send kids to Minuteman or any other technical school, if there is something that a student requires that isn't offered by Minuteman, that's a separate line item that we pay out of the budget and is not does not impact the Neshoba Regional School District budget in any way.
Only in that it affects our budgets and our ability to absorb.
It affects our
additional-
budgets, but
Additional increases from the Neshoba School District.
that's an additional juggling act that we have to
Right.
do, but it's a driver, it's a separate driver.
Yes.
That's that point. I have kept Ms. DeLuca waiting for some time, sorry.
Okay. I guess, I initially thought this might be an April Fool's joke, and it was kind of, knowing that it isn't. I kind of hope that we have better dialogue with the Neshoba district about how we can serve the kids from Neshoba who want to go to Minuteman better. Because the whole point of having two excellent school districts is to offer more to our students. And it's a great thing about living in these three towns, as has been said, that these opportunities exist. But we need to have more cooperation between the school districts and not, butting heads. That feels bad to me.
Well, I was hoping to frame tonight's discussion so it wouldn't be about butting heads, and so that we could, and I specifically laid out this as something that has been discussed, and it's not something that the member towns, at least their boards of selectmen, have even gotten into. So, but if something that is in the interest of the kids, or in the interest of town budget is raised, as Superintendent Burquillan points out, we have to put it at least to a talk. And this has been a helpful first start. Is there somebody else? Dave and...
Yeah, just to flesh out what Don said, I think if we send someone to Minuteman, the next year our assessment from Neshoba will be lower because we'll have one fewer person. And we send about $13,000 a year to Neshoba for each student. So it's the delta between, I think we pay $28, $29 now for each student at Minuteman.
I don't think it's quite that high.
Okay.
I think the basic enrollment is about 18.5 or 19, and then there's the regional transportation on top of it, but I don't know what.
So it would be the delta between, say, 24
That's right.
and 13.
That's right.
So it's not the whole 24.
That's right.
Tom?
Then, I'll just add on to that, then if the building project goes through, then there'll be an additional amount on top of that per pupil. But,
Which building project?
Minuteman.
Minuteman.
But it's not per pupil, it would be per town.
Well,
Well, it's
it'll be based on the
depends
number of
on which
students.
agreement you go by, whether it's
No.
the new agreement or the old agreement.
Yeah, I attended I attended the building project presentation that Minuteman kindly made for Stowe last week. I arrived late, but I got some of my answers, my questions answered about the differences between the regional agreement was very helpful. Yeah, but on the other hand, as long as we're in the regional vocational district agreement, we're gonna have to pay for those costs if they go forward, regardless of how many students we send.
Well,
But it has to be unanimous vote of all the towns.
Right,
But it also has to be unanimous for anyone to get out under the current agreement.
right.
And though some contrary towns won't sign on to the new agreement, even though it would be easier
though
for
they
them
wanna
to
get
get
out.
out.
you're gonna say the best interest, yeah. But I suppose the point I was gonna make, though, is it sounds like the reason that Michael's been looking into this is that he perceives a need for vocational education that might be better suited to some of the students who are choosing not to go. That,
So my comment on that is that, again, vocational education is a term that we throw around and talk about, and again, having experienced it personally and been a Minuteman School Committee member, and talking with, again, people in other states that don't have these types of programs. The real misconception is that specifically for people of my generation and older, we have this conception of vocational trades as a traditional shop mentality of plumbers and stuff like that. And what we're actually talking, when we talk to the students that go and the programs that are enrolled and stuff like that, is really an immersive experience that now embraces, you know, high tech and engineering and sciences and really the core skills that are taught at traditional high schools, but allow for hands-on experience. And that is not conveyed to the people who are influencing the decisions with their children. The kids get an overview and they get that, but they also get the peer pressure of their peers saying, you gotta come to the local town because that's where I'm gonna be. Rather than educating them that the experience that we're trying to guide them towards is more enrichment and preparing them for life skills. And each child is different and has different interactions and learning styles. And the nice thing is that we have two school systems that embrace a number of different learning styles, but we don't really promote and educate our constituents in our community about the benefits of both and the challenges of that. And so there's an opportunity there that I see that we need to educate our community on what are the benefits of both.
Well, I think Ms. DeLuca does a fairly good job under the circumstances of...
Very good job.
Sorry. That correction I will accept wholeheartedly. Very good job, given her the limitations, she's one person, of trying to explain the benefits of the Minutemen program. But as I understand the superintendent, he's saying that he's not challenging those programmatic advantages for certain students. He's saying that he wishes, and we're going to see some data from him, he wishes that they were more readily available to the students in the member towns. Do I understand that correctly?
Absolutely. We have an embedded Minuteman program in all three of our middle schools,
Yeah.
and it's outstanding. And so, you know, by our logic, we would have more kids who want to attend. You know,
And we can look at satellite programs that are Chapter 74 programs along that same model that may be offered in high school. If we're looking at, I've done it before in other places. It's the umbrella of the region, but it operates physically in Neshoba. And students from the three communities are there. We do some similar things, and it's easily tracked and counted for FTE-wise. But it's a creative way to
What does that look like?
expand. It looks like if you have a shop space available, Minuteman teacher, it looks like the middle school program you're familiar with, right? Where we have our...
Oh, tech ed, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Something similar at the high school level.
you want to come to our shop room? Have you seen our shop room?
We can fix it.
You gonna pay for it? Oh, you guys pay for it.
That's not a funny joke.
We have 16 kids from our town.
All right, one at a time, one at a time, one at a time.
Now we have a modular coming.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna say, you've got room now.
No.
But, see, it never hurts to talk about things. New ideas come
Absolutely.
up.
That's why I wanted to bring it up. Just not now.
Mr. Luke.
Just so you know, there's 43 or more, is it 47 vocational frameworks? There's over
Yes,
46
46.
vocational frameworks that in the state of Massachusetts that were completely revised this summer that give the entire breadth of the curriculum for each one of the majors that are offered in the vocational school system. And so it's a very formal curriculum that the kids who go through get. Some of them are getting licensing in a particular trade, and others are getting a set of credentials. So it's not something that you can just kind of say, well, we're going to just do this and we'll just, do it on the fly, because it's really a very specific curriculum that has been worked on by a bunch of people who are experts.
And there are 10 approval criteria that the state requires before any program can be offered under the Chapter 74 regulations. And in the regulations that were just revised, that was strengthened, I believe. But we've been through that before, and I think it makes sense to talk about satellite programs as we go forward. Because we're not able, in our new building, and I didn't mention this either, which is going to be smaller than what it is now. We're designing a building for 150 fewer kids than we have right now. So there's going to be very few out-of-district kids eventually, and the need for satellite programming, I think, is just going to be evident as we look at how we prepare kids for a career and college out of our, high-performing member district high schools.
So as I see it, then the discussion going forward is going to be the superintendent is going to give us more data for his surmise. Maybe it's a little harder than that there are students who want to take advantage of these wonderful programs at Minuteman, but are disincentivized to do so because of the distance. If we get some harder data, then maybe we can decide whether we should take it a step further. And in addition, the two school districts are going to talk about these satellite programs and how feasible they are. Do I understand that correctly?
Sounds like a plan.
Well, thank you for coming.
Then we'll just have to worry about how we're gonna pay for it.
Mr. Chairman. Superintendent, you mentioned before.
Which one?
He pointed.
I'm focusing.
I'm working on the record.
I'm focusing on Ed in the back. You brought up something that I'd like to pursue a little further, and if this isn't the right venue, maybe you could provide some data on it. You're talking about the survey of the kids when you said the ones who were accepted but didn't choose to enroll.
Yes.
And you said number 7 of 10 or something like that was the distance. I'd like to know, at some point, maybe provide some data to all of us, what the top criteria was.
Yeah, we've got a great 2-page summary that we share with the school committee. I can share with Michael.
Just off, what's number 1? What's the number 1 reason that those kids don't come?
They chose another school, and 2/3 of those choosing another school chose a private school.
Okay.
The second reason given was my friends stayed home.
Peer pressure, yeah.
The third, what was the third reason?
You don't have to go through all of them, but I think it would be...
There were 10 variables.
It'd be interesting to see what those are.
Yeah.
Thank
We had
you.
about a 28% return rate, which was pretty good.
No, thank you.
Anything else on that subject? All right. Any new business? Or are we exhausted with the old business? Pardon?
We have another agenda item.
Oh, yes, I forgot. Thank you. Our upcoming town meetings,
We're all meeting the same night, first off, right?
as always.
Well, as recently always, anyway. So whoever put that agenda item on, is there anything, anybody?
I couldn't understand why that was on. Yeah, we're having all of us are having meetings of the town upcoming.
But in recent discussions we've had, kind of like big ticket items, things that are coming up that might prove difficult for our towns to deal with. We've bitten our big nut here in Stowe recently with the excellent work that was done on our fire station community center. We still remain to pay for it down the road, but we don't have any major project like that coming this year. I guess the question is to make our lives, this is not necessarily just the districts, but it impacts them since we're all drawing from the same tax dollars. Did Bolton or Lancaster have anything? I know you've said, Jennifer, you're very, because of the strict limits.
Sparse capital within the budget, we've started almost getting to the point where the Prescott building on Town Green the project's about to start. We'll be moving when that's finished, some of the town offices will be moving over there. But that was a debt exclusion we did 2 years ago. So the money's already been voted. We don't really have anything big, debt exclusion issues coming up. We are still trying to pay off some of the ones we already have. So our town meeting is fairly straightforward. We have nothing of any controversy, any intrigue. I'm looking forward to it.
So, 117, is that on your warrant?
We have no opposition. You've got your situation where 117 goes to Bolton is very different than where it goes through Lancaster.
Can you frame the subject?
Sure,
Sorry.
sure. The State Department of Transportation, I think probably at the idea having been planted in their head by Don, has proposed taking over 117 from 190, and originally it was to 495, that we've kind of convinced them maybe they ought to go all the way to the Stowe line. And so they would assume maintenance, but as part of that, they want to own the fee to the roadway. And some of the advantages are, of course, for years Bolton's been talking about a light in the center of town, and we've never really gotten around to spending the money on that. There are culverts at various places under 117. There are big expenses that we've been ignoring. So, I mean, there are significant savings. There's big fear in town, particularly of people who live along Main Street, that this would inevitably lead to some Route 2 situation or something. And I think a lot of that's overblown. But what we've done on the warrant is, I guess we were originally under the impression that this was not something the selectmen could do because it was a transfer of real estate, but there's an exception for selectmen can petition the Commonwealth to take over a way as a state highway. And so we don't actually need a town meeting vote, but we started this process, so we're going to continue with what's become a town meeting advisory vote. But to frame the issue for town meeting, we're also sort of in the alternative, have an article that would spend $250,000 or so to replace the stoplight at 117 and 110, which is some sort of antique stoplight. We can't even get parts for it anymore. And so it kind of illustrates that if we don't want to transfer responsibility, we need to start spending money on 117. So this seems like it's going to be a very contentious issue. We're thinking a two-night town meeting.
Yeah, we had Mass Highway in, and nobody came to speak against it. Nobody even asked any questions. But we don't have the businesses right up against, like you do, right up on 117, like you have in the center of town. We have two intersections that desperately need lights that we are just not able to come up with the money for the engineering for. I think Mass Highway probably would up maybe by 2 years the possibility of getting lights at 117 and 70, both places. So for us, I mean, they had a very impressive presentation, and they came up with issues I hadn't even considered. I mean, sight lines. Nothing really controversial in that there didn't seem to be anything that was going to encroach on anybody's property significantly. So the Board of Selectmen is just going to vote it.
So it's not even on your warrant. Oh, okay. Oh.
This is the meat and potatoes of Tri-Town. Traffic lights. Anything else that we should discuss about the upcoming town meetings, which are meetings of the towns that are upcoming?
Thank all of our representatives of both school committees and their administrations being here tonight.
Thank you.
And the good turnout of our school committee members. It's good, encouraging. Oh, next meeting, I think, would be the last subject, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I guess, that would be under new business, but if I recall correctly, it's Lancaster's turn to host.
Can be your going away
Could be,
party.
yes, you could be a going.
Retirement party? Okay, so town meeting's the first Monday. Do we want to, are we all gonna be so tired we don't even wanna face?
That's town meeting week, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's my question is,
We could go 3 or 4 nights.
Seriously?
What do you know I don't?
Just kidding.
Yes, school committee budget will take to it.
We're going 2 nights for sure.
are you?
Yeah.
Well, in the past, As long as we get it in before the Lancaster elections.
That's the 13th.
But,
I would be happy to get a room for the 8th, if everybody's gonna be up for it after 2 nights of town meeting.
well,
Me.
it's Lancaster's hosting, but my suggestion is we try and shoot for May. And in the past, we've waived the tri-town meeting during town meeting month. So we could do that if it turns that everybody's gonna have to bail at the last minute.
Yeah, you wanna just do it on the 5th of May?
When's
I'm
that?
sorry, the 6th of May.
That's the
I mean
Wednesday.
Town meeting,
hold
right?
on.
Third time for
May.
Town meeting's 4th and 5th.
That means the 4th, so the 6th or the 13th. We're doing Wednesdays, aren't we?
Well, I would
So
think,
are you guys gonna want to do another night after 2 nights of town meeting?
not that
No.
week.
Yeah, no, I didn't think so.
No. But the next week, it might be good to do, once the dust settles a little bit, to figure out.
Well,
So the
then-
13th?
Yeah, but we'll lose Ms. Leone.
I can still come.
If you promise to come for a going-away citation from the Tri-Town. What we've done in the past also is set a date,
Well, if you promise
and we
to
put out a
cake.
call for items for the agenda. If nobody sends in any items for the agenda, then there's no meeting.
What we did last year was meet in May and then take a pass on June.
Yeah, but you know what you did too? You bolt and skipped it. Because we didn't have a meeting in June, it came back to.
Okay.
So let's
We're not
do-
gonna go get anywhere going back.
I thought that was pretty clever.
Yeah, it was. Just to make sure it doesn't happen again.
You guys might wanna all leave.
Inside baseball.
Let's not criticize going backward. Let's constructively try and figure out going forward.
I've determined it's the Wednesday, May 13th.
Well, I can't promise a
Did you say
cake,
no?
but
Is that your birthday?
No, that wasn't me.
Oh. They will, if they bring cake, then you can have cake.
Yeah, a muffin, what was it, a muffin or whatever?
Right.
Oh, okay.
A mudget.
Mudget.
Budget, that's what it was.
Muffins for the budget. It's mudgets.
So the 7th on the 7 o'clock on the 13th in Lancaster. I will
Right.
move that we adjourn.
Second.
that's fine, although we don't have to be so.
Yeah, we aren't.
Make a note.
But, and I can't promise a cake for Selectman Leone, but maybe we'll just get a framed picture of Tri-Town.